So what happens when a racist a-hole of a cop decides to act tough with a random black man? Unfortunately, in most cases, nothing. But in this particular case, that man turned out to be his new boss, the new police chief, and man, it is satisfying. Let's just say that bad people have bad things coming for them. The sun was just beginning to set over the streets when Anthony Reynolds stepped out of his car. He was dressed casually in a simple button-down shirt and slacks, with no indication of the power and authority he wielded. Anthony had just moved back to his hometown after spending years away building his career in law enforcement. What no one in the city knew yet, what even the police department hadn't been officially informed of, was that Anthony was the newly appointed chief of police. He'd chosen to keep his arrival low-key, preferring to assess the department and the community from a grassroots level before stepping into the limelight. He did this more as a practical joke than anything else. Unfortunately, Anthony would soon find out that he in fact did play his cards right. That evening, Anthony decided to walk to a nearby diner he'd frequented as a teenager. It was a place that held fond memories of simpler times. As he strolled along the sidewalk, he noticed a commotion on the corner of Main and Fifth. A middle-aged black man in a maintenance uniform was arguing with a white police officer. The man's name tag read, Harold. He was holding a mop and a bucket, his expression a mix of frustration and fear. The officer, a burly man with a shaved head, towered over Harold, his hand resting menacingly on the holster of his gun. His name badge read Officer Denton. A small crowd had gathered, their murmurs filling the air as they watched the confrontation. Anthony's instincts kicked in. He approached the scene, careful not to draw attention to himself just yet. "What seems to be the problem here?" he asked calmly, stepping into the circle. Officer Denton turned, his eyes narrowing as he sized up Anthony. "Mind your business," he snapped. "This guy's trespassing, so just let me do my job, and as I said, mind your business, boy." Anthony's face remained the same. He acted as if he didn't hear that racist remark, hoping that this wasn't what he thought it was. Harold's voice trembled as he spoke. "I'm not trespassing. I'm the janitor for this building. I've worked here for 10 years. Denton sneered. "Yeah? Then why don't you have your ID on you? You people are always causing trouble." Anthony's jaw tightened, but he still kept his composure. "He just explained who he is," he said. "Shouldn't you verify that before escalating the situation?" Denton's face reddened. "I told you to mind your business, boy. Don't tell me how to do my job." Anthony took a deep breath, his voice steady but firm. "I'm not telling you how to do your job. I'm asking you to do it properly, boy." The tension in the air was palpable. Denton stepped closer to Anthony, his expression filled with disdain. "You got a problem with me?" he said, his voice dripping with hostility. Before Anthony could respond, Denton spat at his feet, a gesture of pure contempt. The crowd gasped, their murmurs turning into audible outrage. Harold looked horrified, his eyes darting between Anthony and the officer. Anthony didn't flinch. He stood tall, his eyes locked on Denton's. "You've made your point, Officer Denton," he said coolly. "Now I'm going to need your badge number." Denton laughed mockingly. "Badge number? Who do you think you are? You are watching way too much stuff on the internet. You can't do nothing to me." Anthony reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. From it, he produced a crisp official badge and held it up for all to see. The crowd fell silent, their eyes widening as they realized what was happening. "I'm Anthony Reynolds," he said, his voice carrying authority. "Your new chief of police." Denton's smirk vanished instantly. His face turned ashen, and he took a step back, stammering incoherently. I didn't know." Anthony cut him off. "No, you didn't. And that's part of the problem, isn't it?" He turned to Harold. "Sir, are you all right?" Harold nodded slowly, still in shock. "Yes, Chief. Thank you. Before we continue, we want to ask you something as well. Did you like this video and subscribe to our channel? If you didn't, you know what to do. As always, we appreciate it." Now back to Anthony. He faced the crowd, his voice steady and commanding. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. I assure you this matter will be addressed appropriately." Turning back to Denton, Anthony's tone hardened. "Officer Denton, report to my office first thing tomorrow morning, and until then, consider yourself on administrative leave. Hand over your badge and weapon." Denton's hands trembled as he complied, his arrogance replaced by fear. The bald-headed tough guy from before turned into a scared hairy cat, if you know what I mean. The crowd watched in stunned silence as Anthony took the items and handed them to a nearby officer. The next morning, Anthony arrived at the police station earlier than usual. He called a department-wide meeting, determined to address the incident head-on. As officers filed into the briefing room, whispers filled the air. News of what had happened the night before had spread like wildfire. When everyone was seated, Anthony stood at the front of the room, his presence commanding attention. "Good morning," he began. "For those of you who don't know me yet, I'm Anthony Reynolds, your new chief of police. I'm here to ensure this department operates with integrity, accountability, and respect for every member of our community." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Last night, I witnessed behavior that was not only unprofessional, but unacceptable. Let me be clear, there is no place for racism or abuse of power in this department. If you cannot uphold these values, this is not the job for you." The room was silent, the weight of Anthony's words hanging heavy in the air. He continued, "I will be implementing new training programs focused on de-escalation, bias awareness, and community engagement. We're here to serve and protect, not to intimidate or demean." After the meeting, Anthony called Denton into his office. The officer looked nervous, his usual bravado nowhere to be seen. "Sit down," Anthony said, his tone calm but firm. "Do you understand why you're here?" Denton nodded, his gaze fixed on the floor. "Yes, Chief. I messed up." "Messed up doesn't begin to cover it," Anthony replied. "You disrespected a citizen, escalated a situation unnecessarily, and showed blatant disregard for the values this department stands for. I'm placing you on unpaid suspension, pending further review." Denton's shoulders slumped. "I'm sorry, Chief. I'll do better." "That's up to you," Anthony said. "But understand this. If there's a next time, you won't have a second chance." In the weeks that followed, Anthony worked tirelessly to rebuild trust between the police department and the community. He held town hall meetings, inviting residents to share their concerns and ideas. Harold attended one of these meetings and spoke about his experience, praising Anthony for his swift action. "It's not every day you see someone in his position stand up for people like me," Harold said. "Chief Reynolds is the kind of leader the city needs." Anthony's efforts began to pay off. Slowly but surely, the relationship between the police and the community started to heal. Officers who shared Anthony's vision stepped up, leading by example and showing that real change was possible. As for Officer Denton, he completed the mandatory training programs and returned to duty. While he still had a long way to go, he showed genuine effort in rebuilding his reputation and earning back the trust of his colleagues in the community. Anthony knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but he was committed to creating a police force that treated everyone with dignity and respect. And every time he walked the streets of his hometown, he was reminded of why he'd taken the job in the first place: to make a difference, one step at a time. I mean, at this point, who hasn't had a run-in with a racist cop? Have you? If so, let me know your story in the comments.